What's happening when you look at the numbers coming down. A lot of states are in really great shape. You're going to see a lot of openings. But I'll be speaking to the governor of Georgia in a little while.
Yeah. Mr. President, so the American people need to be prepared for going back to social distancing, even if things relax over the summer, but come the fall, if the virus comes back in coincidence.
Well, I could see them, and I'll speak for the doctor, and if you'd like either of you to say, but I would say that you keep away until this thing is gone. It's going to be gone at some point. It's going to be gone. And I would say you keep away and you do the social distancing until such time as you know it's gone. We'll know when that time is.
Your executive orders will last for 60 days. How will you decide whether to extend it? Does it
Well, I'll look at
depend
the
on-
economy, I'll see where we are with the economy, basically, and I think I'll have a very easy decision to make. I hope that the economy is going to be great by that time, but we'll see. But right now, in light of the fact that Americans are out of jobs, I can't be taken in.
Roll it for another 60 days or?
Well, I could roll it for 30 days, or I could roll it for much more than 60 days. We'll have to take a look at the time, but we'll be looking at 60 days and we'll see what it is. Yeah, in the back of it.
And there's reporting that
Under
you...
immigration, we're
Sorry, you go. Why don't you go and then you?
Okay, on the immigration order, we'll continue with that. There is reporting that you may actually sign a second order to even limit more of those exemptions that you were just talking about. Can you confirm that
It
you
could
are
happen
considering?
if I want, but I won't be doing it tomorrow. I'll be signing the primary order, and then we have a secondary order that if I want to do that, we'll make that determination. We
Is
can
that-
do that. Yeah, we can do that at a little bit different time if we want.
But that is under consideration at this
Yeah,
time, a second order?
secondary orders, yeah. Please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have two questions, one from me and one from a reporter who couldn't be in the room because of
You
social
always have that.
distancing.
One from him, one from her.
That's
okay. Good, that's good.
So my first question is about your immigration order. You campaigned on reducing legal immigration. I remember your speech in Phoenix in 2016 on reducing legal immigration.
So I campaign for legal and illegal, but no, I've always said you have to come into the country legally, so not legal. What I campaigned on was people just flooding our border and stopping. And by the way, speaking of that, we have 170 miles, almost 170 miles of very powerful border wall up, and it's moving rapidly, very quickly, and it's having a tremendous impact, and it's making our job a lot easier. Plus, Mexico has 27,000 soldiers right now on our southern border that we share with them, and Mexico's been terrific. They've really helped.
You also campaigned on reducing legal immigration, and I'm wondering if some critics are saying that you are using the virus now in this crisis to follow through on that promise to reduce legal immigration.
No. Well, I want people that are in this country, I want our citizens to get jobs. I don't want them to have competition. We have a very unusual situation where something came in that nobody has seen for many, many decades. Probably 1917 would be the closest analogy if you look at it, when you look at the contagion, the kind of contagion we're talking about. So no, I'm not doing that at all. I want the American worker and our American citizens to be able to get jobs. I don't want them to compete right now. There's a big difference when we have a full economy, and frankly where some of the companies, we have many companies moving in where they need workers. That's a big difference between that and where all of a sudden a lot of people lose jobs.
As you know, a lot of farmers rely on seasonal migrant workers that come
that's
in
not
on
going
the
to be affected. The farmers will not be, that's an important point. The farmers will not be affected. Yeah, that's a very important point. I mean, it's a great point, actually. I'm glad you brought it up. No, the farmers will not be affected.
Your
They've had cases where they stopped everybody from coming in, and all the farmers went out of business. They were literally out of business. You remember that, Brett? It was not so long ago, but it's easy. It's easier to stop everything cold than it is to plan it so that the farmers have the people that have been working on those farms for many years, and that's what we're doing. No, the farmers will not be affected by this at all. If anything, we're going to make it easier, and we're doing a process that'll make it better for those workers to come in, to go to the farm where they've been for a long time.
Now, for a question from reporters out of the room, this is from the Washington Times, Tom Howell. Why hasn't the CDC, the federal government's main disease-fighting agency, had a more public-facing role amid the pandemic? It was holding regular media calls early on, but has not held one since early to mid-March.
Well, I can't tell you that. CDC has been terrific. We've worked with them very closely. They were very much involved, even in the border decision that I made last night. And the director's doing a good job. And We have always, whether it's Tony or Deborah or Steve, we have always a lot of people up, and certainly as you've seen, the director's been here a lot, right? He's been here, he's been sitting here, he's been speaking a lot. No, CDC is very much involved in everything we've done.
Well,
Yeah,
more calls.
The director of the CDC said the protests against stay-at-home orders are not helpful. You've encouraged some of these protests. What are your thoughts on the CDC director saying that these protests are not a good
Well,
idea?
people, look, it's not a question of helpful or not. People want to get back to work. And I've watched some of the protests, not in great detail, but I've seen that, and they're separated. There's a lot of space in between. I mean, they're watching, believe it or not, they're doing social distancing, if you can believe it. And they are, and they're protesting, but the groups I've seen have been very much spread out. So I think that's good. Look, people, they want to get back to work. They got to make a living. They have to take care of their family. They don't want to do this. It's, unfortunate, maybe one way or the other. Both are unfortunate. But you have a lot of people out there that are anxious to get back. Yeah, please.
Surveys seem to be indicating that people are actually more concerned, more people are concerned about the virus spread. They don't want to go out.
Yeah,
They
no,
don't want
that's
to go
true.
to work. They
They're
don't want
both.
to go outside.
They're two groups. They're big groups, both of them.
So my question is, what good is it for these businesses that would reopen if the customers are
Well,
afraid
at
to
the
go
same
outside?
time, we have to build back our country, and I'm going to make our country bigger and better and stronger, and we have to get started. There's a big difference, though, because people have really been through a lot, and they understand what to do now. Before, nobody had ever heard of a thing like this. Wouldn't you say? I mean, nobody ever heard of a thing like this. Distancing, social distancing, what does that mean? Washing your hands every 15 minutes, what does that mean? I mean, people had never seen or heard about anything like this. Now they really are. They've not only have they done it, but they've done a good job of it. But you have people, you can't break the country. At some point, you have to go back. Now, hopefully the governors are going to do, because I want the governors, and I've always wanted that. You can call it federalism, you can call it whatever you want. But the governors, I want them to do it. If we see them doing something we don't like, we'll stop it very quickly. But they're doing a good job. They're being careful. Some of the governors, frankly, they're in a position where they can do it sooner or they can do it a little bit later, and that's okay. But people, they don't want to, they need money, they need help. We're going to lose, and we can't break our country over this. We can't do it. We have to get going. With that being said, some are going to go soon and some are not. Yeah, in the back, please.
If I might just, pardon me, hair salons, nail salons, tattoo parlors. Dr. Birx, can you weigh in on this? Because the people of Atlanta want to hear from you as well, as much as they want to hear from their governor and from you, Mr.
Yeah, I
President.
think it's fine.
How do you safely have hair salons and nail salons and tattoo parlors where people
Where is that?
inherently,
Where is
this is in Georgia, where people have to inherently be close together?
I think what I've been trying to communicate over the last several days is it's really important that the governors and mayors communicate critical information to their communities and show very clearly the data. Remember, we wanted this data and evidence-based, the data that they utilize to make decisions and the data that the mayors should use in each of the communities, because it will have to be on a community by community opening, because there are different communities in different places, even in Georgia. And so I believe people in Atlanta would understand that if their cases are not going down, that they need to continue to do everything that we said: social distancing, washing your hands, wearing a mask in public. So if there's a way that people can social distance and do those things, then they can do those things. I don't know how, but people are very creative. So I'm not going to prejudge, but we have told people very clearly, and the president guidelines made it very clear about the expectations of phase one. And remember, phase one also included social distancing in restaurants, social distancing in every place that was entertainment, and keeping your own individual social groups to less than 10. I mean, we've been very clear in the guidelines, and I think it's up to the governors and mayors to ensure that they're following the best they can each of those phases to make sure that both the public is completely protected. But the governors and mayors also need to communicate very clearly on the data that was used for decision making and make that transparent and available to their communities.
And it also depends, as an example that you just gave, Are they doing testing before they go in? We have to find that out. That's why I'm speaking to the governor a little while, and I'll be asking him those questions. Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just trying to get a sense of what you have left in the toolbox as it relates to oil. You hashed out the deal with OPEC Plus. You've ordered for purchases into the SPR. I mean, what else can be
Well,
done?
the biggest thing in the toolbox is to get our country open. That's by far the biggest thing there is. If we can open pretty well, and I think we're going to, over a period of time, piece by piece, puzzle, remember? If we can open well, I think that's your biggest part by far. That's where the engine is, more important than any other thing that we can work on. Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Two New York-related questions. In your meeting with Governor Cuomo, was there talk about providing states like New York with aid in the fourth stimulus package? Wondering if you have any thoughts on whether that aid should be tied to infection rates, whether states like New York, New Jersey that have been hardest hit should receive more money, and also wondering if you have any thoughts on Mayor Bill de Blasio saying today that he'd like to host ticker tape parade of sorts once this is all over to honor the healthcare workers. Does a New Yorker have any
Frankly, that sounds like a good idea to me. When it's all over, it sounds like a great idea. They deserve it. They're warriors. They've done an incredible job. We mentioned briefly the state aid. We talked about that, Governor Cuomo and myself, and I agree with him on that. And I think most Republicans agree too, and Democrats. And that's part of phase 4. And I think infrastructure is going to be a big part. We have to rebuild our country. I mean, you take a look where we spend, and we go over this all the time, but $8 trillion in the Middle East. We want to rebuild our country. And that means our bridges, our tunnels, even schools. We're doing something with schools. We have to do our roadways. That what's happened, we spend so much money on other countries that they don't appreciate it. Okay, they don't appreciate it. We're going to spend money now on our country, and it's going to be our jobs, and it's going to be our equipment. It's going to be made. Much of it is going to be made here. Hopefully, at some point, all of it's going to be made here. John.
Mr. President, at that podium back on March 9th, Vice President Pence said that over 1 million tests had been distributed, and then he said, and this is an exact quote, before the end of this week, another 4 million tests will be distributed. As you know now, 6 weeks later, we still aren't at 4 million tests.
I don't know what to say
with the testing.
Ready? Are you ready? Again, I'll say it for the 5th time. We have tested more than any country in the world, and some of the countries are very big. Okay, more than any country in the world. We have one of the most successful, if you call mortality rates, because one person, and I always say that for you in particular, one person is too many. But we've done very well. Our testing, if you add them all up, we've tested more. Now, I don't know what Mike Pence said, but I'm sure he could answer that
He
question.
said 4 million tests, and we're
You
6
know
weeks
what?
later.
You
we're
ready
at that
again?
point.
We've tested more than every country in the world, even put together. So that's all I can say. As far as Mike, he'll answer your question when he's
Mr.
here. We'll be back tomorrow.
I just want to go back to the China deal and the phase 1 of this China deal.
Yeah.
The flight ban is still in place. How confident are you that the Chinese are not going to invoke the natural disaster clause to just wait before getting into
Well,
their...
we're going to see. Look, there's nobody ever been tougher on China than me. And that means for 20 years, you go back 20 years, I probably got elected at least partially on the fact that I've been very tough. I said China's been ripping us off for years. I'd go into Michigan, I'd go into Pennsylvania, I'd make speeches unrelated to being a politician. I'd be invited, I'd be speaking to people, which I like to do because I love the people of this country, and I'd make speeches. I say, how did you let this happen with China? I even asked the leaders of China, how did this ever happen? Where our country loses tens of billions of dollars a year. And I don't mean just tens. Take a look, 200 billion, 300 billion, 400 billion, 500 billion dollars a year. How did they ever let a thing like this happen? Now, if you look at this last year, the deficit went way down, and I'm talking about even before. Now it's much different. But a lot of things are happening. Great things were happening. Except, all of a sudden, out of nowhere came the invisible enemy. And we think we know where it came from, and we'll be talking about that probably a lot. but came the invisible enemy. There's been nobody tougher than me on China.
I have no guarantee that they are going to go ahead with this.
But if that happens, we'll do a termination and we'll do what I can do better than anybody. Yeah, please.
About China, have U.S. intelligence analysts told you that they think that the virus escaped from a Chinese research lab, that it was an...
Well, I can't tell you that. Have U.S. intelligence agents told me? I mean, what kind of a question is that?
Do you feel
I can't. Do you want me to tell you? Or let me tell you what they told me. Look, they told me plenty. They told me plenty. Brett?
I wanted to follow up on, you said about the small business program, Harvard's going to pay the money back. How confident are you that you can claw back money from
Well, I'm
places
gonna have
like
to look. I don't like when Harvard, that has, I think, a $40 billion endowment or some incredible amount of money, that Harvard gets this money. Harvard should pay that money back. I want Harvard to pay the money back, okay? And if they won't do that, then we won't do something else. They have to pay it back. I don't like it. I don't like it. This is meant for workers. This isn't meant for one of the richest institutions, not only far beyond schools, in the world. They gotta pay it back. I want them to pay it back. Yeah.
Mr. President, your Florida clubs have had to furlough workers.
That's true.
And have you thought about, asking your family members to maybe keep some of those workers on the payroll to help, instead of sending them to the federal
Well,
government, these other companies?
Yeah, in Doral, you're not allowed to have the golf courses open. You can't have the clubs open. You can't have anything. It's a big hotel and resort, and I think there's probably 750 people. So you can't have anything open. And you say, what are we going to do? Have full payroll and have the whole place with, there's no income coming in. First of all, everyone's home, and they're supposed to be. Second of all, in Florida, you can't use golf courses. That one I'm not sure I agree with. You have parks and golf courses where you have open space, but that's what it is. So I have others also. Then I have others in different states. I have a lot of different properties. But again, my children run them, and I love my children, and I wish them well. I look forward to comparing my numbers to my children's numbers. I think I'll do better.
You haven't thought about asking if you
understand that. Well, the closed property, it's like, you have to close them up, and then hopefully when things get better, we'll just open it up. But you can't have, many hundreds of employees standing around doing nothing. There's no customer. You're not allowed to have a customer. So in some places, it's very strict. New Jersey's strict. New York is strict. And you have to do what you have to do. And it's too bad. I feel so badly when I see that. I think that it's a tough policy, but I go by whatever the policy. That's a state policy in the case of Florida.
You've communicated regularly with Kim Jong-un, the North Korean leader. Are you going to try to reach out to him to check on his condition?
Well, I may, but I just hope he's doing fine. I mean, I've had a very good relationship with Kim Jong-un, and that's to the benefit of the country. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. And I'd like to see him be well, and we'll see how he does. Again, I don't know that the reports are true.
Line of succession, as far as you know?
I don't want to ask him that. I have asked him that, but it's not my purpose to tell you that, in all fairness. But I hope he does well. Please.
Can I follow up with Dr. Birx for a moment? Dr. Birx, if you don't mind, I just wanted to follow up on the question we were asking you about with social distancing in some of these states. With Georgia opening back up, things like tattoo parlors, getting a massage, social distancing, maybe there are some creative ways, but it seems very difficult to do social distancing. So do you have a message for people in Georgia who are soon going to have a choice about going to the hair salon or the nail salon or getting that tattoo if they're not 6 feet apart and they're not able to follow these social distancing guidelines? What's your message to people in a state like Georgia?
Well, we made it very clear in a message to all of the American people with opening up America again, the criteria that we wanted states to follow. Those were careful criteria. There were only 6. They were carefully selected in conversations with epidemiologists around the world and with CDC to really pick things that people could understand and use platforms that people have utilized in the past. But it was built on the premise that it needs to be data-driven and it needs to protect those who are most vulnerable. And then it went through the phases, and the very first thing it says, in all phases, all individuals need to continue to wash hands, protect the vulnerable, ensure the safety of others. But in phase 1, it made it clear that social distancing was absolutely key. And I think it's on the White House website, and we ask every American to read it and to use that as their guidelines. Now, we've also asked governors to create county-level information so that communities can see the information and understand why they may be different than a different county, so that it's very transparent and understandable. I had a question here a couple of days ago on a Jacksonville beach, and Jacksonville is dramatically different than Miami. And I think that was reflected in why Jacksonville had a different set of information and regulations. So I'm not going to judge anyone about their decision making. What I'm going to say is we were very clear in what we really believe protects the safety of Americans, and that is clearly laid out in the Opening Up America again.
If I may, I have a question because we got data from Tokyo, an increase of cases and a double of the cases in Singapore. We've been, looking a lot at Europe after China, and then we're back into this area of the world. Here we're talking about a plateau and then cases going down. Any lessons to take out of what's happening in this area in Asia after having put our attention somewhere else for so long?
The lesson is to be careful. We've got to be very careful. We don't want that to happen. It could happen. I think we stamp it out if it does happen. We're not going to be doing any mass closings, I hope. So I think we could, I call them some burning embers, and we put them out. And I think we've gotten very good at that. But we'll see. But we don't want that to happen. No, absolutely.
You can tell, Mr. President, once the reopening happens, we won't need to go back into reclosing.
I don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. Nobody in this room wants to do that. You look forward, I think, Brett, very soon, and John, sitting next to a lot of your fellow reporters, right? The room seems so empty this way. But it's one of those things. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Mr. President, thank you. On the topic of public support for your immigration treaties, an Ipsos USA Today poll just came out and found 80% of Americans are supportive of the immigration halt, the temporary freeze.
Yes, I know that.
Did that have any, did public support have any effect on your decision making here? And are you surprised by those numbers?
Yeah, it's a high number. I did not see that number. I heard there was a poll. I'm sure there'll be a lot of polls. No, look, I think the American people want to make sure that they have jobs for the American people, not for people that come in many cases illegally into our country. So we're doing that. I don't know what the numbers are, but I think just common sense tells you that's where we should be, and that's where the American people want to be. And we're going to build our country back. And I'm telling you, with all of the things that we're doing and infrastructure, which we desperately need, it's going to be an incredible thing taking place. I think it's going to be a renaissance. We're going to have something that will be, a lot of people are going to go to work building those roads and bridges and tunnels and highways and all of the other things we're going to be building. And broadband for the Middle West. I mean, the farmers haven't been treated fairly. Let's face it, the farmers have been treated terribly when it comes to the internet, so we're going to take care of that. We're going to make them very happy. So we'll see you all tomorrow, and we'll have some interesting things to put out tonight, and I appreciate you being here, and it's an honor to have Bret Baier here. I've used his slot a lot, John. I've used that slot a lot.
Get on, Mr. President.
We want to have you back soon. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, there you see the President of the United States wrapping up his press briefing. Welcome to Special Report. I'm Bret Baier. We're doing it tonight from the White House briefing room, a little bit different tonight. We've just watched the daily coronavirus task force briefing. President Trump saying he will be temporarily suspending immigration into the United States for 60 days because of the coronavirus. An extension is possible, he said. It'll be evaluated. Suspension only applies to those seeking permanent residency. The order is currently being written, may be signed tomorrow We're following some major stories tonight, but we wanted to bring in John Roberts, whose seat usually is right here, Chief White House Correspondent. I took it over for the night. John, thanks for letting me have the seat. I wanted to talk to you about this immigration order and what we know. He said there will be exemptions, especially for farmers.
Yeah, I mean, there will be a lot of exemptions for farmers who have to bring in temporary labor to do the crop picking. There are also, right now around the world, thousands of au pairs who are lining up to come in to help childcare for middle-income families. Those people come in on a temporary visa, not seeking permanent residence, so they would likely be allowed in. There are, of course, a lot of people who would like to come to this country once the travel opens back up again on a tourist visa. Those likely wouldn't be affected. The president was pretty specific, Brett, in saying it's just people who are looking for permanent resident status in the United States, the so-called green card applicants, who would be affected by this initial 60-day ban.
The other interesting thing I thought was the interchange about North Korea and what we know or don't know. Didn't shed a lot of light about Kim Jong-un, but wished him well. It's interesting to see those reports. We just don't have firm knowledge of what his status is tonight.
No, and there's an awful lot we don't know coming out of North Korea. A lot of this is emanating from South Korea. Sources that I have in the administration have been telling me to be very cautious about the reporting, that there's a lot that's come out from South Korea about North Korea that turns out not to be true. But it is curious that some significant events that Kim Jong-un would have likely gone to had been missed. So there is some suspicion here among top administration officials that something may have happened in North Korea. They just don't know at this point what.
All right, John, thank you from the North Lawn, and thanks for the seat tonight. I thought we'd do it a little differently. Finally, tonight we want to end with some good news, the brighter side of things. Members of the NYPD went out of their way to make sure a 90-year-old Korean War veteran was taken care of when they discovered he was having trouble getting his groceries. The officers went to a local grocery store, bought the man food for the week. Ken, a 94-year-old World War II veteran, sleeps with a photograph of his late wife every night. An employee of his at his elderly care home in England surprised him with a special gift, a pillow with his wife's photo printed on it. That's a good one. And New Yorkers applauded essential workers yesterday with the residents performing a tribute to the city from his balcony. Take a listen. Thanks for inviting us into your home tonight. A little different tonight. Thought we'd get on the air. Fair, balanced, and still unafraid. The Story, hosted by Martha McCallum, starts right now.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Martha McCallum, and this is The Story. So moments ago, President Trump weighing in on Georgia Governor Brian Kemp's measures to reopen his state beginning this Friday. Governor Kemp is allowing a wide range of businesses to get open again. Restaurants and theaters are going to be open on Monday after the Friday openings. All must follow social distancing and other safety measures. Watch this.
But the governors, I want them to do it. If we see them doing something we don't like, we'll stop it very quickly. But they're doing a good job. They're being careful.
So Governor Kemp is going to join me in moments. He's here to respond to some heavy criticism of his plan and even potential legal action against it. Here's Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms.
We are going to have to figure out if we legally have a grounds to put in different orders in place within the city of Atlanta.
Restrictions are loosening elsewhere in the South as well. Take a look at these. May 1st in Tennessee, a majority of the businesses are going to be allowed to reopen then. Also South Carolina, certain retail sales and the beaches are going to open at 20% capacity. That is the South Carolina plan right now. So let's take another look at Georgia here. Georgia's population is 10.6 million people. As of noon today, 3,700 of those 10.6 million are hospitalized with COVID-19. And they have had today 799 deaths. Now it has been 14 days since the projected peak of daily deaths in Georgia, according to the widely cited IHME modeling. Now that model assumes that current social distancing policies stay in place throughout the next couple of months. So let's bring in the governor from Georgia, Brian Kemp. Governor, thank you very much for being here this evening. It's good to have you with us. Let me begin, I guess, by asking you, great to have you. Let me ask you to respond to the Atlanta mayor, because obviously Atlanta is a very dense population, and she clearly has some big concerns about reopening the places that you would like to open.
Well, Martha, look, the mayor and I have a great relationship. She's working very hard, just like all local elected officials are, to protect their population. I'm doing the same thing. We've worked together on a lot of things. I've heard comments about this issue, and I've certainly had a lot of praise and a lot of criticism, but we're taking a measured step. I would urge people to really look at the guidance that we're going to be putting out the rest of the week. I announced this on Monday so we can have time to educate the public and the business owners that this is just not handing them the keys back to go back to where we were. This is a measured approach with a lot of different requirements and guidance that we're going to be putting out. And I'm very confident of that step. It was done in conjunction with public health officials based on the data that we're seeing in our state and the gateways to the phase 1 part of the president's plan.
All right, so, we just watched Dr. Deborah Birx, and she was questioned about your plan to reopen on Friday. And she said, that she feels it's incumbent, and I'm paraphrasing, incumbent upon governors such as yourself to be very transparent about the data that you used to make this decision. So can you explain to everyone at home tonight, what is the data that brought you to this conclusion, especially given the fact that deaths are still rising in Georgia? What data did you use?
Well, I think it's important for people to understand how the data comes in. A lot of the data that we're posting today, the testing or the fatality may have happened, 5 or 6 days ago based on the type of reporting that's being done. I mean, look, I spent all weekend working with Dr. Toomey, who's a, great epidemiology, a great public health official, one of the best, I think, in the country. I did not make this decision without her support. We poured over this data. We're looking at all kind of different models. I've had hospital CEOs that I've been in contact with that reached their peak way back on April the 6th. I've spoken to them about the idea of doing some elective surgeries. They were supporting that decision. They support a measured opening, which is what we're doing. It's going to be very limited in scope, basic operations. We're talking about a few businesses that I closed down to help flatten the curve, which we have done in our state. But for us to continue to ask them to do that while they lose everything, quite honestly, there are a lot of civil repercussions of that, mental health issues. We're seeing more patients in our trauma centers in our state because people are just, they're tired of it. And it's a tough balance. And I understand where folks like the mayor and others may agree or disagree. I got some people